You've been making the same mistake for years and still calling it character. You convince yourself that blowing up is honesty, that raising your voice is keeping order, that losing your temper is a logical response when someone provokes you, contradicts you, or disrespects you. And then the hangover hits. That mental fatigue, that quiet guilt, that feeling that you handed your energy to someone who didn't even deserve it. It's not life that's beating you. It's your automatic reflex that's running you. You don't lose calm over big things. You lose it over small things, repeated things, the stuff that slips in without permission on some random Tuesday. A poorly chosen phrase, a gesture, a message that doesn't come through, a relative who won't let it go, a stranger with an opinion. And instead of observing, you jump. It's like walking around with a door that has no hinges. Every time someone touches it, it falls. The Stoics weren't cold. They were clear-sighted. They understood that real power isn't moving the world, but not letting the world move you on the inside. If you're here, it's not to learn how to put up with it. It's to learn how to be in charge of yourself. I'm Gabriel, and today we're going to go through 10 secrets nobody teaches you, so you never lose your calm again with anything or anyone, especially at this stage of life where you don't have time to waste on nonsense. The last point is the one that changes everything because it gives you your authority back without having to fight, so stay until the end. Let's begin. 1. Identify the real trigger. You think you get angry because of what they said, the way they looked at you, or the tone they used with you, but that's almost never the real trigger. What sets you off is something else, feeling ignored, feeling belittled, feeling like you're not being taken seriously. The sentence you hear is just the spark. The fuel was already inside, built up from years of swallowing things, demanding too much from yourself, or expecting respect from someone who doesn't know how to give it. Your day gets ruined by details that other people would consider insignificant. A comment about your age, a joke about the way you do things, a criticism disguised as advice, a curt reply on the phone. And your body reacts before your mind. Your jaw tightens, your heart speeds up, heat rises in your chest, and that urgency to answer right now shows up. That's the moment where everything gets decided. Most people don't see it. You're going to see it. What's hard to admit is this. Sometimes you're not defending dignity, you're defending wounded pride. It hurts you less that they disrespected you, and more that you feel like you don't have control. It bothers you that the other person gets away with it, because in your head that means you lose. And that's where you become predictable. Someone who wants to provoke you doesn't need strength. They just need to find the right button. If you've got buttons everywhere, they'll operate you like an old appliance. Picture your mind as a house. The problem isn't that someone knocks on the door. The problem is that you live with the door open and no filter, letting any noise in. Instead of checking who's calling, you rush to the entrance as if every visitor were a threat. That's the reactive life, always on guard, always ready to fight, always tired. Calm doesn't break because the world is harsh. It breaks because you're not identifying what part of you feels threatened. The Stoic shift begins when you separate the event from your judgment. Epictetus made it clear. It's not what happens that disturbs you, it's what you think about what happens. That line isn't pretty philosophy. It's a switch. When someone provokes you, the first thing that appears isn't reality. It's your interpretation. And if your interpretation is always, they're attacking me, they're disrespecting me, they're taking something from me, your body gets ready for a war that often exists only in your head. When you identify the real trigger, you gain space. You stop arguing about the surface and start seeing the root. Sometimes the real trigger is exhaustion. Sometimes it's hunger. Sometimes it's physical pain. Sometimes it's the feeling that nobody listens to you in your own home. And when you see it, you become smarter than your impulse. Not because you get soft, but because you stop firing at shadows. Your practice here is simple and sober. Watch yourself in the exact second the heat rises. Name it internally without drama. It's not I got mad, it's I felt ignored, I felt questioned, I felt pushed aside. That name gives you control back because you're no longer fighting the other person. You're recognizing your vulnerable spot. The person who knows himself stops being a hostage. You don't need to beat anyone with your voice. You need to win yourself back with clarity and wisdom. 2. Separate what depends on you. There's a reason you keep losing your calm. You're trying to control the uncontrollable as if it were your responsibility. You want people to be polite. You want your family to understand. You want the world to have common sense. You want others to behave the way you expect. And every time it doesn't happen, you experience it as something personal, as a provocation, as a direct insult. That's where the exhaustion comes from. You can see it in everyday life, in small things. You correct everyone. You jump into arguments that give you nothing. You reply to messages with a tight stomach. You keep chewing on phrases for hours. You go to bed replaying conversations, imagining responses, building late defenses. And then you wonder why you're tired if nothing serious happened. The usual thing happened. You handed your energy to something that doesn't belong to you. The truth you don't want to admit is uncomfortable. Sometimes you get angry because you expect the world to treat you the way you treat it. That expectation sounds noble, but it's a trap. You can be decent, respectful, and firm, and still run into people who are clumsy, selfish, or simply distracted. If your peace depends on the other person being fair, then your peace isn't yours. It's borrowed. The inner mechanism is simple. You confuse control with safety. You think that if you control your environment, you'll be safe. That's why contradiction, criticism, and unpredictability make you desperate. And that's why getting older can sometimes hurt more, because you no longer feel like wasting time. So every conflict feels like theft. But real safety doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from knowing what you can govern when the world moves. The Stoic principle that fixes this is the most direct and the most useful. Distinguish between what depends on you and what doesn't. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by betrayal, illness, and pressure, and still insisted on the one thing he could keep intact: his ability to choose his response. It's not resignation, it's precision. It's stopping yourself from wasting gunpowder on the wind. When you apply this distinction, you change your posture. The other person's comment is no longer a command. Bad manners are no longer permission for you to lower yourself. Someone else's mistake no longer forces you to correct it with anger. You are not the world's emotional police officer. You are the guardian of your mind. And a guardian doesn't argue with every bark. He watches, decides, acts with restraint. Here's what it comes down to. Every time something lights you up, you return to your center and tell yourself internally that your reaction does depend on you. Your tone depends on you. Your silence depends on you. Your decision to walk away depends on you. Not as a pretty technique, but as a discipline of dignity. Life gets lighter when you stop demanding that other people be different in order for you to be at peace. Calm doesn't arrive when the world gets organized. It arrives when you stop fighting what was never yours to control. 3. Regulate your body before responding. You think the problem is in your mind, but many times the fire starts in your body. Hasn't it happened that you react with more fury when you're tired, when you didn't sleep well, when your back hurts or your stomach is off? In those moments, you're not deciding clearly. You're defending your nervous system like a cornered animal. And then you're surprised by the things you said that you didn't mean to say. It wasn't character. It was biology out of control with your mouth as its accomplice. You live like an engine running at high revolutions all day. Jaw tight, shoulders raised, shallow breathing, chest tense. In that state, any phrase sounds like an attack. Any tone sounds like contempt. Any disagreement feels like a threat. It's like trying to argue with someone while running uphill. You have no air, no patience, no perspective, just urgency. The problem isn't the argument. It's that you arrive at the argument already out of internal oxygen. You were taught to believe that controlling yourself means holding it in, as if calm were a heroic act of brute force. But that's clumsiness disguised as pride. If your body is in alert mode, you're not strong, you're reactive. And the worst part is that you justify it with old phrases. That's just how I am. No one makes a fool of me. I don't let things slide. Yes, you do. You let yourself be dragged by an impulse that lasts seconds and charges you hours of peace. The mechanism is simple and brutal. Your body senses danger, releases tension, speeds up your pulse, and pushes you to attack or defend. Not because the other person is a monster, but because your system is overloaded. That's why, before you speak, your body has already spoken. Your voice rises, your eyes narrow, your breathing shortens, your hands want to move. And when the body leads, reason trails behind like a sleepy child. That's how calm is lost. not for lack of ideas, but from excess activation. The Stoics understood this without calling it the nervous system. They called it discipline. Marcus Aurelius didn't tell himself to breathe nicely. He told himself, if I rush, I don't belong to myself. The Stoic stance here is practical. If you don't govern the body, you don't govern your words. Your breathing is your steering wheel. Your jaw is your brake. Your posture is your internal signal of command. It's not mysticism, it's order. First stabilize the vehicle, then choose the route. The invitation is simple. When you feel the first wave of heat, don't rush to be right. Slow down before you open your mouth. Notice where you're tightening, your jaw, your fists, your shoulders. Loosen slightly, like easing a rope that's about to snap. Ask yourself silently whether what you're about to say improves your life or just releases tension. Calm isn't about always staying silent. It's about speaking when you're present, not when you're possessed. When you regulate your body, the provocation loses fuel. The other person may stay the same, but you're no longer the same dry ground ready to catch fire. And that shift is real power. Not the power to shout louder, but the power not to be manipulated by an impulse. 4. Correct the automatic interpretation. You don't react to what happens, you react to what you think it means. Someone gives you a strange look and your mind translates it as, they're judging me. They reply curtly and you translate it as, they despise me. They don't answer your message and you translate it as, they're ignoring me. With that translation, you build an entire movie in seconds, complete with villains, hidden motives, and bad intentions. The strange part is that most of the time, none of that is there. There's just human clumsiness, distraction, or fatigue. But you're already ready to fight a story you invented without realizing it. In daily life, it shows up in tiny details. You walk into a meeting and a moment of silence feels like rejection. A relative makes a joke and you take it as a personal attack. Your child answers in a rush and you turn it into disrespect. A stranger cuts you off and you see it as provocation. Your mind is trained to detect threats, not to look for simple explanations. And when you've lived that way for years, calm becomes a rare visitor, as if peace itself were suspicious. The excuse usually sounds reasonable. I'm just seeing reality. I have experience. I know how people are. No, you know your filter, and that filter tends to protect you by exaggerating. You defended yourself so many times that now you defend yourself even when it's not necessary. Your automatic interpretation isn't wisdom. It's an old reflex. And an old reflex can ruin a new day. You don't need more information. You need to correct your internal translation before you act. The invisible root is the need for certainty. When you don't know what something means, your mind prefers a harsh explanation over uncomfortable doubt. It's easier to say, they disrespected me, than to admit, I don't know what happened. Uncertainty irritates you, so you fill in the gaps quickly with suspicion, pride, defense, and that's where you become a prisoner, not of others, but of your own inner interpreter constantly shouting, danger. The cumulative cost is heavy. You live tense, anticipating, reading between the lines, exhausting yourself with interpretations. You steal good moments from yourself because you're busy scanning for bad signals. And worst of all, you end up responding to people as if they were guilty of something they never said. The relationship cools down, the atmosphere turns rough, and you confirm your own prophecy. See? People are like that. No. People react to your reactivity. It's a circle you keep feeding. Here's the shift. Epictetus said it plainly. What disturbs you isn't the event, but your judgment. Correcting your automatic interpretation isn't being naive, it's being precise. It's moving from threat mode to observation mode. Before assuming bad intent, consider the simplest explanation. Before responding as if you were attacked, check whether you were actually attacked or whether your pride was just touched. That pause doesn't weaken you. It brings you back to reality. This isn't about swallowing everything or smiling out of obligation. It's about choosing an interpretation that makes you more self-governed. You can tell yourself, I don't have all the information. This may not be personal. I decide the meaning I give this. And when you stop interpreting automatically, a different kind of calm appears. Not the calm of avoidance, but the calm of clarity. The one who corrects his interpretations stops fighting shadows. 5. Deactivate the wounded ego. At this stage in life, you shouldn't still be fighting to prove your worth, yet sometimes you do it without admitting it. A small comment hurts you, and you react as if the ground had been pulled out from under you. Someone contradicts you, and you experience it as disrespect. Not because it's serious, but because it touches an identity. I'm someone. I have experience. I deserve consideration. And yes, you do deserve consideration. But when you demand it with anger, you become a slave to that demand. Behind it, there's often a simple emotional pattern. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of not being taken seriously. Fear that your place fades with time. So you cling to being right, to control, to having the last word. And when someone questions you, your ego rises like a guard dog barking out of habit, not real danger. It's not malice. It's old insecurity looking for protection in the form of a fight. Imagine your ego as heavy armor. You put it on to survive difficult seasons and it helped you. The problem is that now you wear it even to buy bread. And in that armor, every small brush feels harsher because you're rigid. The armor doesn't give you peace, it gives you posture. It makes you feel strong, but it also keeps you from breathing, moving, listening. When you live armored, everything feels like a blow. No one can get close without you preparing to defend yourself. The cost is quiet and constant. You get tired of people, and people get tired of accidentally stepping on your pride. You lose good conversations over minor corrections. You lose affection to win arguments. You lose time maintaining an image. And at the end of the day, when you're alone, there's no real victory. There's just tension in your chest and an uncomfortable question: why does this affect me so much? A wounded ego demands daily tribute, and your peace pays for it. The internal shift comes when you admit something. What the other person says doesn't define your worth. It only reveals their state and touches your sensitive spots. An insult doesn't force its way in. It enters because it finds an open door. And that door is the ego. When you start to see it that way, the board changes. It's no longer about winning. It's about not giving yourself away. You don't hand anyone the wheel of your mood, not out of arrogance, but out of dignity. The Stoics were relentless about this. Seneca spoke about the freedom of not depending on others' opinions, and that freedom isn't achieved by arguing, it's achieved by letting go. The Stoic posture here is simple. You don't need to prove your greatness, you need to live it quietly. Reason, temperance, and justice begin within, not in someone else's mouth. When your ego asks for a fight, you can choose character, and that choice is real authority. Lower the intensity and look at yourself honestly. Ask what exactly you're defending. Your dignity or your vanity, your boundary or your need for recognition? There's a huge difference. A boundary is set calmly. The ego imposes itself loudly, and if today you choose to stay silent, to step back or to respond without venom, it's not because you lost, it's because you refuse to be handled. When you deactivate the wounded ego, life becomes lighter. You're contradicted and you don't shatter. You're criticized and you don't ignite. You're provoked and you don't get bought. Because you've understood something many learn too late. The one who always needs to win lives in constant loss of peace. 6. Love solitude and be your own best friend. If there's one thing that steals your calm after a certain age, it's continuing to live as if you needed company to feel complete. How many times do you get worked up not because of what someone did, but because of what someone didn't do? Didn't call, didn't reply, wasn't there? That's where the quiet dependence begins. And that dependence turns any gesture from others into a threat, because if they leave, you feel like the ground disappears beneath you. What's interesting is that most people don't fear being alone. They fear listening to themselves. The moment you get a bit of free time, you fill the space with noise, TV in the background, conversations that don't nourish you, commitments you don't even want. And then you wonder why you snap at the smallest provocation. You snap because you're carrying an inner thirst that nobody can satisfy for you. When you don't have friendship with yourself, you look for the world to hold you up. And the world wasn't designed to hold you up all the time. That search is where irritation slips in. Someone else's silence bothers you because it reminds you of your own inner silence. You get angry when you're not considered because secretly you're not considering yourself either. And then a dangerous trap appears. You confuse company with calm. You think being around people settles you, but many times it drains you, scatters you, leaves you more reactive. It's like drinking salt water. At first it feels like relief, but in the end it makes you thirstier. Think of it like a house. If your house is messy inside, any visitor makes you nervous. Not because the visitor is bad, but because you're afraid someone will see the chaos you no longer want to look at yourself. When you put the house in order, the visit stops being a threat and becomes a choice. Solitude works the same way. When you inhabit it with dignity, it's no longer punishment, it's territory. And on your territory, you decide who comes in, who adds, who subtracts, and who just brings noise. The Stoics called this freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to not need the world's approval to be at peace. Seneca said it clearly. Someone who is at peace with himself doesn't depend on external applause. And applied to calm, that idea is simple and brutal. If you become your own best company, nobody can kidnap you with their presence or with their absence. When you start treating yourself the way you'd treat someone you love, your reactions change. You speak to yourself with respect, not contempt. You listen to yourself without rushing. You allow yourself to be quiet without feeling abandoned. And in that space, something appears that you couldn't see before. Most of your anger was misdirected hunger for affection. You didn't need to win arguments. You needed to be with yourself without fighting yourself. The one who learns to be alone stops begging for calm from other people's behavior. And when you stop begging, you stop exploding. 7. Apply the 4 Stoic virtues. Calm isn't sustained by willpower alone. It's sustained by a compass. And the Stoic compass has 4 directions: wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. When you lose your calm, it's almost always because one of those virtues goes dark, and another one puts on a disguise as an excuse. You call your impulse courage, your pride justice, your suspicion wisdom, and your resentful silence temperance. You can see it clearly in everyday life. Wisdom is seeing the fact without inventing intentions, but sometimes you interpret before you observe. Justice is treating the other person with dignity, even when they're wrong, but sometimes you punish with words as if you were the judge. Temperance is regulating yourself so you don't react like a slave to emotion, but sometimes you explode and then say it was inevitable. Courage is holding a clean position even when it's uncomfortable, but sometimes you avoid or attack because you're afraid of looking bad. The most common confusion is thinking calm equals passivity. It doesn't. Stoic calm is interaction. It's choosing the right virtue at the exact moment. Wisdom to distinguish what's real from what's assumed. Justice so you don't sink to the same pettiness you criticize. Temperance so you don't turn an instant into a wildfire. Courage to set a boundary without shouting and hold it without shaking. In every provocation there's a test, and the test isn't the other person. It's you. Imagine every argument as a crossroads. If you choose pure impulse, you take the familiar road and end up the same way, tired, regretful, replaying it in your head. If you choose virtue, the crossroads changes. Wisdom tells you when to stay quiet and when to speak. Justice reminds you the other person is human, even if they're difficult. Temperance lets you respond without poison. And courage keeps you from betraying yourself out of fear of looking weak. That combination is what makes calm solid, not fragile. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress. He wrote to obey his own compass. In the middle of power and pressure, he reminded himself that nobody can force you to be unjust, impulsive, or cowardly on the inside. And that's the practical key here. Calm doesn't depend on the other person being reasonable. It depends on you being virtuous in the Stoic sense, consistent, sober, and in charge of your response. The invitation is quiet and direct. Every time you feel yourself about to lose your calm, ask which virtue is missing in that moment. Is wisdom missing because you're interpreting? Is justice missing because you want to humiliate? Is temperance missing because your body already took over? Is courage missing because you're afraid to set a boundary without drama? That question doesn't slow you down, it makes you precise. And precision is calm. When the virtues govern, calm stops being a mood. It becomes character. 8. There's a reason you sometimes lose your calm over a tiny phrase, as if someone scratched open an old wound with a fingernail. It's not the phrase. It's what it drags along behind it. Resentment doesn't show up as hatred. It shows up as active memory, like an internal record that turns on by itself and puts you in defense mode even when the day was going fine. And the most delicate part is that you confuse it with prudence, when in reality it's weight. You see it in almost invisible things. You catch yourself replaying conversations that already ended, rehearsing answers nobody asked you for, remembering details with an unhealthy precision. Your face changes when someone mentions a name. Your tone changes when a certain topic comes up. And sometimes you don't even realize that this rigidity has become your normal way of being in the world, as if you were always waiting for the next offense. The usual confusion is thinking that letting go of resentment means losing your case, dropping your guard, giving the person who hurt you the win. That's why you keep holding it, because you think if you let it go, they win. But resentment isn't a weapon pointed outward. It's a rope tightening around you from the inside. And as long as that rope stays taut, any small brush makes it vibrate, and you respond as if you've been at war out of habit. Noise, rush, and automatic reaction distort this even more. You find yourself irritated for no clear reason, and you go looking for a quick culprit to justify the discomfort. And then resentment offers the perfect candidate. Someone from the past, someone in the family, someone who still owes you. It's convenient because it gives you a story, but that convenience costs you because it turns your present into a continuation of the past, as if you never allowed yourself to close the door. It's like carrying a splinter under your skin. You can't see it, but it's there. You can go through the day without thinking about it, until you brush against something, and suddenly the pain takes over everything. Resentment works the same way. It doesn't ruin you only when you remember. It ruins you when it makes you react from an old part of yourself. And that's where calm becomes impossible, because you're not responding to what's happening. You're responding to what happened. Here, Stoicism doesn't ask you to forget. It asks you for justice with yourself. Not the loud justice that wants to punish, but the sober kind that says, "This happened, I learned, and I'm not paying for it with my peace anymore." The smallest temperance, just one, can change the destiny of a conversation. Not because you become soft, but because you become in charge. The wound can exist, but it doesn't have to guide your hand. Pause honestly and ask what you're really protecting when you cling to resentment. Your dignity, or your need for the world to give back what it took from you, because that payback almost never arrives. And while you wait, you keep poisoning yourself in silence. Sometimes letting go is simply stopping the replay, stopping the feeding of it with thought, stopping the use of it as an explanation for everything. When you let go of resentment, you don't change the past. You change your starting point. Calm returns because you're no longer living with an emotional splinter, waiting for the next brush. 9. Choose distance and firm boundaries. There are people who don't take your calm because of what they say, but because of what they awaken in you when you're near them. You become more tense, more watchful, more reactive. And you call it patience, loyalty, good manners, as if it were mandatory to stay in places where your worst version rises to the surface. At this stage, calm isn't begged for, it's protected. And protecting it sometimes means stepping away, even if the other person doesn't understand. This shapes your life more than you think. If your phone rings and your stomach tightens, that's already a sign. If before a family gathering you're mentally preparing your defenses, that's a sign. If after talking to a certain person you need half an hour to return to your center, that's a sign. The problem isn't a single episode. It's a repeated dynamic that forces you to live on alert. The subtlety almost no one sees is this. Often it's not hard for you to set boundaries. It's hard for you to hold them without over-explaining. You draw a line and then erase it out of guilt. You say no, and then you justify, negotiate, clarify, apologize for protecting yourself. And in that endless explanation, the other person finds the crack to step back in. Not because they're brilliant, but because you yourself doubt your right to take care of your peace. Your automatic reaction is to make the boundary sound kind, flawless, unquestionable. You want no one to feel offended, everyone to understand, everything to be clear that you're reasonable. But real life doesn't work that way. Some people get offended when you stop being useful. Some people get uncomfortable when you stop arguing. And if your calm depends on them being pleased, then your calm isn't in charge. Their expectations are. Think of a boundary as a door, not a speech. A door doesn't debate, persuade, or argue. It opens or it closes. And the adult who wants peace learns to handle that door with serenity. You don't have to shout to close it. You don't have to hate to keep it closed. You just have to decide who comes in and who doesn't, and stop acting as if every attempt to enter were an emergency. The Stoic principle here is sober and brief. Don't confuse justice with people-pleasing. Being just also means being clear, and sometimes clarity is distance. Quiet courage is tolerating being called cold when you're actually being responsible. This isn't about punishing the other person, it's about not punishing yourself by repeating the same exhaustion. Pause and look at yourself honestly. How many times have you had to lose your calm just to feel taken seriously? And how many times after finally exploding, did you feel worse afterward? Calm isn't built by winning an argument. It's built by refusing to enter spaces where you always end up losing yourself. Sometimes the strongest boundary is your absence. When you choose distance firmly, you're not left alone. You remain whole. 10. Live with awareness of limited time. There comes a point in life when arguing no longer entertains you, it impoverishes you. Not because you're not right, but because the cost is too high. Every outburst steals energy, sleep, health, and leaves a bitter aftertaste that victory can't wash away. And the saddest part is that many of those battles don't even matter the next day, but your body still pays for them. This changes the way you decide. You begin to notice that time doesn't only pass in hours, it passes in inner states. It slips away in rumination, tension, anticipation, in that constant feeling of being ready to respond. And when you live like that, life shrinks. You're physically present, but inside you're busy defending something that produces no peace. Do you really want your maturity to become a battlefield? The subtle truth is that limited time doesn't make you rushed. It makes you selective. You don't have to correct everyone anymore. You don't have to prove yourself in every conversation. You don't have to enter every provocation as if it were a final trial. But if you're not conscious of this, you'll keep reacting with the same intensity you had 20 years ago, even though inside you're already tired of it. The automatic reaction is usually this: believing that if you don't respond, you lose. That if you don't put people in their place, they'll walk over you. That if you don't correct, you're being disrespected. And that narrative keeps you hooked on conflict, as if your identity depended on always being ready. But real authority at this stage isn't sustained by noise. It's sustained by presence, boundaries, and the ability not to bite the hook. Imagine your energy as a budget. You can spend it on small arguments and have nothing left for what truly builds: your health, your home, your purpose, your peace. People who live irritated think they're defending their life, but they're actually spending it. The morning goes in a phrase, the afternoon in a memory, the night in a rewritten conversation. One Stoic reminder is enough here without turning it into theory. If time is finite, your attention is sacred. And if your attention is sacred, you don't hand it to just anyone. Temperance isn't staying quiet to look good, it's choosing where it's worth showing up. Courage isn't arguing, it's walking away from an argument when you know it steals the best of you. Pause before the next impulse. Ask yourself whether what's provoking you will matter when you lie down tonight. Ask whether that person deserves your afternoon. And ask honestly whether your calm isn't worth more than that brilliant response you're about to deliver. This isn't resignation, it's maturity. When you live with awareness of time, calm stops being a wish and becomes a daily decision. Today wasn't about learning to put up with it or becoming indifferent. It was about reclaiming command. Because losing your calm isn't an inevitable accident. It's a habit trained over years of reacting quickly, defending pride, carrying wounds, insisting where there is no respect. And the good news is that what's trained can be untrained. Calm doesn't arrive by luck. It arrives when you decide your peace is worth more than your impulse. When you begin to live this way, something shifts inside without noise. Your body stops being constantly braced for impact. Your mind stops searching for enemies in every gesture. You become simpler, clearer, harder to manipulate. And that transformation doesn't need applause. It shows in how you breathe, how you look, how you answer with few words, and how you step away without guilt when the situation doesn't deserve your energy. The responsibility is yours, and that's both frightening and liberating, because no one is coming to hand you calm on a tray. No one will behave perfectly so you can feel okay. The real question is, how much longer will you allow a comment, a tone, a memory, or a person to decide the climate of your day? Life doesn't ask you to win every argument. It asks you not to lose yourself in them. And if you recognized yourself in this today, don't use it to punish yourself. Use it to practice. This isn't solved with a heroic promise. It's built with steady repetition, with small decisions you sustain. There will be days when it flows better and days when it's harder, but the path is the same. Return to yourself again and again until your response becomes your home. If this content brought you value, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And I want you to write in the comments the phrase, "I am Stoic," along with the name of the country you're listening from, because I love knowing which parts of the world this growing community of Stoic men and women comes from, people who no longer want to live at the mercy of impulse. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. On the screen now, you'll see 2 recommended videos to help you keep deepening this inner mastery. Choose one, continue, and train your calm with intention.